Good morning on the day after Pesach, in this most extraordinary year. I hope that Pesach for you was, I'm sure, was unexpected, probably in how it was celebrated. Certainly the Seders, as we said before Pesach, most of us were celebrating the Seder probably not the way we had planned or anticipated, but assuredly, most definitely, the way that He, the one above, had planned us to spend this Pesach, both the first days of Pesach and the Seders, and the last days of Pesach, which of course concluded yesterday. In the Hasidic tradition, Pesach ends much the same as it starts. We begin with the Seder, and we conclude with a Seder of sorts, known as Seudas Mashiach, the meal or the feast of Mashiach, during which we eat matzah and also drink 4 cups of wine. We we don't have the maror and the charoset, but that's the staple of the meal. And what this concluding meal of the last days of Pesach is about is representing the fact that the totality of the holiday of Pesach is really the bridge and the road to freedom that started with the Exodus from Egypt and will end with the coming of Mashiach. And on the last days of Pesach, we pivot more towards the redemption of Mashiach, Messianic redemption. And the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, 300 years ago, instituted this custom. I call it a Seder. It's not as mandatory or obligatory as a Seder. It's a custom to send off Pesach, as it were, with a Seder-like meal called the Feast of Mashiach, during which, much the same as we talk about the story of the Exodus and the Seder, at the Feast of Mashiach, the meal of Mashiach, we talk about the story of what lies ahead, of what is yet to come, of where we are all headed, of what the end game looks like. And it's a very powerful and empowering opportunity to do so. So on a personal level, if I had to sum up this Pesach experience, it's certainly been personal, in so much as it's been very unusual to celebrate the Seders in every meal just among the family. And while unusual and unexpected, it's been very, very meaningful, and it's been a tremendous opportunity for the family, for the children, to be really, really engaged and connected, and for us to be able to share thoughts, to ask questions, and to be very, very open and expressive. It's been a really very wonderful and meaningful in that regard, and I hope that's been true for you too. Nice ring, huh? True for you too. So now here we are on the day after. Where to from here? Well, fortunately, we're not lost. We have the Torah to guide us every day and every step of the way of this journey that we're all on, both personally in our own lives and both as a nation and as a people and as a part of a grander historical narrative of which we are all writing a chapter right now. So today's Hayom Yom, today's Hasidic teaching, relates the following. The concept that there is a revelation of Mashiach on the last days of Pesach is relevant to the entire Jewish people. So first the Rebbe is saying this idea of Mashiach and the spirit of Mashiach, as it were, the energy of Mashiach being more prevalent in the world on the last day of Pesach is not just something that people of lofty souls are attuned to because they have a very high level frequency, but that's an energy that is palpable to all, accessible to all. On Pesach, the dynamic between God and his people is characterized by a leap, meaning the word Pesach itself, Passover, what does it mean? It means to leap, to jump. God passed over. He leapt past the Jewish homes. And Pesach begins with the might of God's watchfulness. Overall, we experience freedom. Afterwards, however, we are plunged back into the world. This then is the above-mentioned revelation of Mashiach, the resolute power that it generates, enabling us to continue on in the world. So what the Rebbe is saying is this. Pesach starts with a jump, with a leap, in so much as it's a radical, if you will, departure from everything we were doing up until that point, and then we're like catapulted into this world of the Seder, this very extraordinary meal that has an incredible aura and energy about it. It's very extraordinary. It's a leap from the ordinary into the extraordinary, and that really carries through the whole Pesach, because the whole holiday is called Pesach. So what that essentially means is that on Pesach we leap into this extraordinary space, which means in an extraordinary time there's an extraordinary energy associated with Pesach, and it compounds as Pesach progresses and reaches its height and most intense level towards the end of Pesach, and as Pesach comes to an end. Now, invariably, what happens a lot in life is that highs are followed by lows, because you experience something that's inspiring, that's uplifting, that's different, that's extraordinary, and then you take a step outside, and then all of a sudden the reality of the world hits you, and it's like you plunged back to square one, like everything that just happened didn't happen. So what the real challenge in the uplifting and inspiring times in life, the challenge is to be able to integrate that into the ordinary, which is to create a bridge between the extraordinary and the ordinary. And what the Rebbe is teaching here is that when we talk about Mashiach, we're not just talking about some fantastical, futuristic concept, but rather we're talking about an empowerment to be able to integrate the extraordinary with the ordinary. And what that means is that on Pesach we have this palpable sense of being free. And what freedom means, what does freedom mean on Pesach? And what does freedom mean in general? What does it mean that we became a free people? Because in a way we traded one taskmaster, if you will, for another. We traded Pharaoh for God. And it's not like God said, now you're free to do whatever you want. Free to do whatever you want is actually not the definition of freedom. A lot of people who do whatever they want end up in places that they would never want to be. What freedom means is free to be the truest, deepest, most real part of you, and free to express that. That's what freedom is. So we became a free people on Pesach. Means that we were now given the space and the opportunity to access our own selves, to be our own selves, because we had been, when you're a slave your sense of self, your sense of identity, of individuality, is robbed from you, is stripped from you. You are enslaved to the agenda of another, and it's too imposing and it's too suffocating to give you the opportunity to be able to even look internally within yourself. You're too mired in the hardship of slavery. So God took us out of that confining space of Egypt, which is not only confining physically, like a big, large prison from which we couldn't escape, but it was also confining psychologically, mentally, spiritually, and granted us freedom. Freedom meaning the freedom to be our own truest selves. So in simple language, a person feels best about themselves when they feel like they are free to truly express themselves. So a person who's an artist will feel a sense of exhilaration in being able to express themselves artistically, and very frustrated if that talent and that ability is squelched, squashed, or denied them. But artistic expression, even for an artist, while it runs very deep into the soul of an artist, is not the essential self. The essential self, the essence of all of us, is the fact that we are souls that are extensions of God. And so the deepest part of ourselves is the part of ourselves that identifies with God, that identifies what does it mean to identify with God? It means to identify with the purpose for which God brought me into this world. And so when you are a slave, you don't have time to think about purpose. You're just trying to get through the day. And we could be slaves even outside of Egypt too. If the totality of our life is just to get through the day, then we're just slaves to the moment. To be free means to have a deeper perspective, and that life is not just about getting through the day, as it were, but about fulfilling the purpose for which I'm here. And that's Mashiach. Mashiach, in other words, means a state of a mind, a state of living that is driven by purpose, not simply by pleasure or existence and just getting by. So that's the teaching of the Yom Yom for today, which actually segues into the Tanya, which the Tanya today tells us an amazing, fascinating thing. And that is this: we live today, like really today. Thank God we have the technology, but also thank God we live in a time where so much of what we purchase today is online and deliverable. And you look around the streets today. Well, the streets today are almost empty of cars, but what you do see are the Amazon Prime delivery trucks and the UPS delivery trucks and the FedEx delivery trucks, and House of Mine with a whole bunch of girls every hour on the hour. We've got another delivery of shampoo, conditioner, you name it. There's an endless stream of deliveries, orders and deliveries and orders and deliveries, and everything can be done just from the palm of our hands. So the Alter Rebbe in today's the Tanya shares with us a very Kabbalistic and powerful concept, and that is this: that the idea of the way time is broken up into hours. A day consists of 24 hours. You might argue, well, that's just sort of an arbitrary way of dividing a 24-hour period into 60-minute increments, which we call hours, and so on. And you could divide it any way that you would want to. This is just this is the way that society has decided by consensus to measure time, by seconds, minutes, hours, and so on and so forth. But the truth is that the division of time is not arbitrary. It is actually reflective of the way that time is spiritually divided, which is in 24-hour increments, 12 hours of the day, 12 hours at night. And that is reflective of 24 different permutations of God's name. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that, but what that means is that every hour has a unique and particular spiritual energy that is the product of a particular combination of the letters of God's name and a particular permutation. And listen to this amazing concept. What happens at the end of the hour, every hour, is that the angels make deliveries to heaven every hour on the hour. And what do they deliver? They deliver the mitzvot, the good deeds, the prayers, the holy energy that we have cultivated and generated through our actions, are then put onto a delivery truck and delivered. And our life is then measured by what did you deliver in the last hour? What did we deliver in the last hour to heaven? What kind of deposit did we make? How did we load up the Amazon truck this past hour? And it's an incredibly powerful way to look at life, because it makes us very accountable. Every hour, in other words, we have to be able to look back, and it's not necessarily that we have to actually consciously do this every hour, but generally need to be aware that every hour we need to be able to say, theoretically, look back and say, okay, here's the mitzvah I delivered this past hour. This is what I accomplished in the world during the last hour. And what that means is that the energy of every hour, holds us accountable, but also it empowers us to have a greater appreciation for the opportunities that life presents us. And because every hour has its own energy and is different opportunities will present themselves in the course of any given hour, where we have a choice to make, which is either to do the mitzvah, not do the mitzvah, make the right choice, or otherwise. So what is the sum total of a day? And one is supposed to, at night before retiring, do a little accounting for the day. And a simple way to do that is to ask me, how many deliveries? What did I deliver to God today? What did I deliver? And what did I deliver the first hour of the day, the second hour of the day, and so on. So this is an extraordinarily powerful framework within which to live. So that time is not a seamless flow of same old, same old. Not only is one day not same old, every hour is not a same old, every hour is new, every hour is a different energy. It's fresh, it's distinct. And what that also means is that if I wasted the last hour, that doesn't mean that this day now is a write-off and now this hour is pretty much, a write-off because I wasted the last hour. No, this is a new hour. So this is a new opportunity. This is a new energy. So this is a really, really powerful, perspective and framework within which to have productive lives and productive days and productive hours. So that's the Tanya for today. And speaking of productivity and advancement and delivering mitzvot and delivering good deeds and goodwill to heaven, the Torah portion of today are the laws of kosher. The basic fundamental principle of kosher is that a holy and sacred body requires a holy and sacred diet. When the Jewish people were taken out of Egypt and made free, as we have discussed, on the march to Sinai, at which time God declared us to be the chosen people, he chose us not only in terms of having a spiritual mission and message for the world, which are to be his ambassadors to the world, to be the divine consciousness of the world. He also, what that means is that he chose the actual instrument, the physical instrument, the physical body, to be holy and to be sacred. And so, like I said, a holy container, a sacred body, requires a holy and sacred diet, and that is what kosher is. So the Torah provides us with the parameters of kosher as it pertains to what we're allowed to consume and what we're not allowed to consume, what's prohibited, both in terms of animals, fowl, and fish. And we know that the kosher signs for an animal are that it has split hooves and chews its cud. And the idea of the split hooves is this. The hooves are the feet of the animal. And what the feet enable are mobility. And that's true for an animal, that's true for a human being. The fact that one of the signs of a kosher animal is split hooves, the fact that that is what is permissible for us to consume means that there's something about that conceptually, spiritually, there's an energy about that that's appropriate for the way we ought to live. And this segues very much to what we spoke about before. In so much as every time the animal looks down at its foot and it sees that it's split, it's a perpetual reminder that every step forward that it takes is in essence like a half a step. And the animal looks at the other half of its hoof and is reminded that there's now another step to take. As opposed to if the hoof was be completely closed, it's like every step has a certain sense of finality to it. Okay, this is it. I've taken a step and I'm stationed here and I've arrived at this station and this is as far as I'm going to go. The splitting of it is indicative of a drive to continue to move, to continue to be mobile. And that segues what we spoke about before, that every single day through life is a journey in which we need to feel the compulsion to progress and to not be static. And that's true of every hour of the day, as we said before, because every hour has an energy that's unique to it. And that ought to drive us to see every day as a challenge to be upwardly mobile. And upwardly mobile ultimately means to be spiritually upwardly mobile. And what that means is that we need to feel good about the things that we accomplish and the things that we do, but they always should be seen as a step towards an even greater accomplishment. And this was a trademark habit, if you will, of the Rebbe, in the way that he would acknowledge people who would share with him things that they had accomplished. You can see this many times, people receiving blessings in dollars from the Rebbe, and a lot of this is in the Rebbe's letters to people, in which the Rebbe would always acknowledge the accomplishment, but always, without exception, challenge the person to see that accomplishment as now a stepping stone to accomplish even more, and to never get into this comfort zone spiritually of satisfaction and say, this is it, I have arrived, because there is no nirvana, because there's never a point of arrival. The basic definition of a living organism is that it's not static, is that it's growing. So to be alive means to be growing, to be moving forward, to appreciate the uniqueness of every single day, the pregnancy of opportunity in every hour, as we spoke about from today's Tanya, that every hour has a unique energy to it that challenges us to utilize it and to fulfill it and to send our delivery, as it were, of spiritual energy to the world, to ourselves, and to God. So we now are in this interesting transitional day between Pesach and the rest of the year, as it were. And in this case, it's a very we only have one day in between Pesach and Shabbos, and we go straight into the sanctity of Shabbos. But I think something else unique about this year is that as we started today's Hayom Yom, the Hasidic teaching, he uses the word that usually Pesach is a plunge from the extraordinary into the ordinary. Like we wake up the day after Pesach and it's like, back to the grind, as it were. Well, in the situation we're in now, as we all know, it's not exactly the grind that we're used to. And we're all sort of we're all in this zone right now of this great disruption, if you want to call it that, that has been brought upon the world. And it can be viewed in this context as sort of softening the plunge. We're not crash landing like we usually do, coming from this extraordinary high of the end of Pesach, the Feast of Mashiach, and we're feeling very connected, we're feeling very purpose-driven, and then the next morning, boom, if you have kids, you're in the car going to carpool, and you're running off to work. Right now, no one's running anywhere. Nobody's running anywhere. So we actually have an opportunity now to be able to really integrate and really absorb the meaning of Pesach. And as we've spoken about a number of times, that nobody asked for this extraordinary time in which we're living now, this great disruption. But we do know that it is absolutely and totally being orchestrated by God. And we therefore have to utilize every single day of this very unusual time in the most positive and productive manner possible. And so we are all being forced to take a step back right now from the way we typically lead our lives. So this is a really extraordinary opportunity for us to be able to just reorient ourselves as to what our life purpose is really about, and how we are going to grow and advance in what truly matters in life, which is our purpose in this world. And our purpose is to utilize our own unique giftedness in making the world a more godly, holy, and spiritual place. And that, as we said, is ultimate freedom. Ultimate freedom is to be able to express the deepest and truest part of our own selves. And Pesach opens up the pores of our souls and our psyche to be able to access that part of ourselves that is absolutely sure of its identity, of who I am. The whole idea of Pesach is we are brought into this story, the story of the Exodus, and we are part of this story. It starts with identity, because identity means, where do you come from? What's your past? What are you a part of? Pesach gives us that identity. We're a part of this story of a Jewish people that started with the Exodus and that continues on. And we are writing the chapter of that story right here and right now. And this is an extraordinary chapter, no doubt. And we will look back at it forever. And hopefully we will look at this chapter and see it as having been a very meaningful time for all of us to have really reevaluated our purpose in this world, and may it be the springboard and the catalyst for deeper living, more purposeful living, which is ultimately more joyous living, more redemptive living. With that, I bid you all a Shabbat Shalom and a good Shabbos, and thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you, God willing, on Monday morning, same time, same place.